You're paying for things you don't know you're paying for. You're listening to The Data Edge, the podcast for facilities management, construction, and infrastructure teams who are ready to get time and money back with their data. I am Stephanie Wiechers. Today, we're talking construction procurement, specifically what's actually inside your invoice data and why most procurement teams have no idea. This one's going to get into numbers, real examples, and real things I've seen in client data sets. So let's go. Every construction company I talk to says the same thing. We know our spend. And what they mean is they know their suppliers. They can pull up a report out of their ERP and tell you they spent 8 million with Technische Unie last year or 35 million on subcontractors. And that is real. It's useful, but that is supplier level data. And it's not the same thing as knowing what you bought. Here's the difference. Knowing you spent 8 million with a building material supplier tells you nothing about whether you got a good price, whether prices are consistent across projects, whether you're buying the same product from 5 different suppliers under 5 different descriptions, with this creep happening month on month. So for that, you actually need item level data. You need to go inside of the invoice. Here's the thing. That data exists. It is sitting in your ERP right now. It's just never been classified, cleaned, or looked at. So, item level data and what it actually shows you. Let me give you a real example. I worked on a data set for a Dutch construction company, renovation, maintenance, infrastructure. We're talking ballpark 50 million in spend. So this is real data. At a supplier level, the information looked fine. You'd see the big subcontractors, the material suppliers, the usual names, tidy enough. But then when you go item level, when you look at what's actually on the invoice lines, you start seeing things. And there's 3 things specifically. 1, price variation on the same product. Take insulation board or gypsum plasterboard. These are commodity products, same brand, same spec, same size, but across products, across projects, across time, you're seeing the same item coming up at different unit prices from the same supplier. And we're not talking a 5% difference here. There's 40% difference. That's a negotiation opportunity. The reason this happens is no one is looking. Not a 5% difference. We're talking 30 to 40% difference here. That is not negotiation. That is chaos. The reason it happens is no one is looking. Each project manager signs up their own invoices. There's no central view. So the supplier charges whatever they charged last time on a project, and nobody compares it to what the next project is paying. Item level classification gives you that comparison. Suddenly you can say, here are 15 products we buy. Item level classification gives you that comparison. Suddenly you can say, here are 15 products we buy consistently. Here's the price spread, and here is how much we would save if every project paid the best price we've already achieved somewhere. Second point, tail supplier fragmentation. In this data set that we've been analyzing, painting and finishing had over 40 different suppliers. 40. So this is paint, brushes, prep materials. Now, some of that is legitimate. We're talking different regions, different project types, but a lot of it is project managers buying locally because it is convenient and no one's ever consolidated that spend. When you suddenly can see this at an item level, you can ask, what are we actually getting? Are we getting different products? Or are we buying the same Sikkens primer from 40 different merchants? That question alone can drive a consolidation initiative that saves 10 to 15% on a category. And then the third one is scaffolding and what concentration risk looks like. Same data set, scaffolding category. One supplier had 82% of total scaffolding spend. 82% is a big chunk. Now, maybe that's a strategic choice. Maybe that supplier is excellent, the relationship is strong, but if no one has ever looked at that number, it's not a strategic choice, it's just what happened. And that is a dependency risk no one has consciously decided to take on. You only see that when you classify the data. Until then, it's just invoices, PDFs coming into the mailbox. the stuff that shouldn't be there. Now, this is my favorite part because this is where it gets a bit wild. Okay, are you ready for it? When you go into the invoice line data, you find things that have nothing to do with the project. Charges that crept in, things that got approved because no one was reading the lines carefully enough. A few of the examples that I've seen, a big one, I'd say fuel surcharges. This one is incredibly common. So a supplier will add a fuel surcharge line to the invoice. It's been there for maybe 3 years. It was added during COVID as fuel prices spiked. Now fuel prices come back down. Surcharge never goes away. I mean, obviously right now we are in a huge spike with a lot of oil and fuel prices being charged by suppliers. And we understand why that happens. But we need to realize this is a separate line item that gets buried in a long invoice and that always gets approved. So how much are we talking here? Maybe it's 30, maybe it's 80. I mean, often it's actually like 5 or 7. But multiply that number by how many invoices you get from that supplier per month, times 12 months, times however many suppliers are doing it. And it adds up, where I believe it's at least worth a conversation. Then transport charges. It's related but different. So you agreed on a delivered price. Contract says delivery included, but there's a transport line on the invoice anyway. That's usually a mistake. Well, and even if it's deliberate, either way, you are paying for something that you didn't agree to pay for. And here's the thing, with item level classification, you can run a query. Show me every invoice line that contains the word transport or delivery or freight across all suppliers, all projects, all the time. And it takes 10 seconds. That doesn't exist if you've never classified your data. And then random items. So I'll keep this vague because every company has their own version. But I've seen cleaning supplies on a construction invoice, catering on a maintenance contract, office furniture on a site delivery. These things happen. Sometimes it's a supplier lumping things together for convenience. Sometimes it's more deliberate. The point here is you can't find any of this if you're looking at a supplier level total. It's invisible. The invoice just goes through, it gets approved, it gets paid, and that's the end of it. And we're not talking big numbers here, but we are talking compounding numbers. So what does good look like then, right? We've talked about where are the opportunities, but how can we do this better? What does good look like when you actually have this under control? Okay, first, you have a category structure. Every invoice line maps to a commodity code or a category. It can be a widely approved scheme like the UNSPSC. It can be your own taxonomy, but it's really important that it's consistent and it covers everything. So mutually exclusive, but together you cover every single category. Second, you have rules. When a line comes in from a specific supplier, it gets classified automatically. When a description contains certain keywords, it goes to the right bucket. So you build this once and then it runs. And then third, you can answer questions. How much did we spend on installation materials in Q1? What's our average unit price for HR++ glazing across all projects? Which projects are running above benchmark on material costs? These questions take and should take 10 seconds, not 10 days. And then fourth, and I mean, this is the one that matters to the CFOs, it's you have a defensible audit trail. Every line classified with the logic behind it. That is what good procurement governance looks like. The difference between a construction company that has this and one that doesn't is not the size of the company. I've seen 100 million revenue, 500 million revenue, 1 billion revenue companies with no item level visibility. And I've seen much smaller ones running very, very clean procurement operations. It's not about the budget. It's about whether anyone decided to look. That is it for today. So if any of this sounds like your data, supplier totals, you trust more than you should, invoices going through on autopilot, categories that are really, really just supplier names, that is the problem that Pearstop fixes. We classify, clean, and enrich your invoice data so you can actually see what you're buying. Start at pearstop.com. or shoot me a message. See you next week, where we're going to talk about how this looks in facilities management and what we've seen there. Thanks for joining us today.